think I'm good. I'm ready.
I'm not. Give me a sec. Oh, man.
Number 5 for me, Guardians Volume 1.
Mm.
Yeah, a lot of things that you said I agree with, right? It's about family, about, a lot of misfits coming together. And sure, like a lot of the film is setting up like them coming together. But for me, like watching that happen, to see that process coming together, where would you ever think like you would get those people to come together, right? But like you watch it happen, and that's the fun part for me, is like watching them come together, understanding, okay, like maybe they don't fit, but they do fit, right? And to me, it sets up um, a lot of, I guess, what you can expect from Volume 2, which I haven't even talked about yet, really. But Volume 1, to me, it's a lot of fun. And it's one of those first films where like you look at the list of Marvel movies coming out, right? And you got like, you got Iron Man, Captain America, you got Thor, right? Even the Hulk, right? You got these movies where like, okay, like I've heard of these people, and then Guardians of the Galaxy, like who the fuck is that? I've never heard of them. It's so like out of the blue, but it's fun. It really, like, I guess a lot of what's clouding my judgment is like that initial watch of the film where I'm like, oh wow, like I've never heard of them, but I love them so much, right? That whole shock of like it exceeded all my expectations.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my number 5, and now I can get into what I disagree
Ooh.
with you about this film.
Uh-oh.
My number 5 is Black Panther. So you said, so to me, I'll just say what it is for me as my counterpoint to what you said.
Sure.
For me, the movie is like specifically talking about Black Panther himself, the king. It is him in the beginning because he does go through the ritual. He accepts being a king and he accepts the responsibilities of it and what it means. But he doesn't necessarily understand the weight of it just yet because he's grew up in Wakanda forever, right? And he just believed their belief system. He listened to what his dad and everybody else before him taught him because that's just what he knew, right? And then you have Killmonger, who's this poignant character of like what African Americans unfortunately go through in the American system, right? He is the representation of like that oppression, that systematic racism, that discrimination, which, I mean, talking about this specific week that we live, right, with the hashtag George Floyd and Miss Taylor and all those and just still discrimination and police brutality and stuff. It's like it's a Marvel movie, but it's a Marvel movie that to me probably has the most message in it about what it means to be an African American, what it means to be an individual living in that system, and what that system does, unfortunately, to a lot of youth. It makes them corrupt. It makes them feel like they have no other way except this one way of violence. And Killmonger goes that long way, right? Because he feels not only oppressed by the world he lives in, he feels also oppressed by the world he came from, which is Wakanda. He blames Wakanda for taking away his dad, and he takes America for not giving him a choice, right? And I don't know, and I just love Michael B. Jordan. I think he's a great actor. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I know a couple of people tend to not like him as an actor, but I think in this movie he's fantastic. So you have this weird dichotomy of like this kid who grew up poor and became this like very powerful type of individual, and this kid who grew up completely privileged but has no understanding of what the outside world really is, right? Because he kind of grew up in a utopia. So of course when Killmonger comes for the first time, he absolutely demolishes Black Panther because he's grew up in that comfort, right? The first real shock he has is Bucky unfortunately killing his dad, right? That's the first real, like, this is what the outside world has to offer, right? And in Civil War, he goes through that and realizes that revenge isn't the answer, and sometimes you need to like forgive and forget. But and I feel like in Black Panther, he really realized like, oh, the outside world's really messed up, and we as a nation, we as a people have not helped it at all. We have we have family outside of this world that we are not helping, that we are very capable of helping, and we're not doing so. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
eventually, when he realizes like it's not about me, it's not about my family, it's about my people, it's about the world, it's about all of us helping each other and being a community. That's when he's able to overcome Killmonger, because he's no longer fighting for his throne, quote unquote. He's fighting for an ideal, for a cause, for the greater good of his tribe, of his nation, and of the world in general. And I don't know, that to me, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes the CGI is a little bit like, whoa, that is CGI for
Mhm.
sure. But I don't know, man. To me, the film resonated to me a lot with those themes, and like, and yeah, everyone quotes it, but that last thing that Killmonger says, like, it's like, man, don't bury me, throw me out at sea like my ancestors, because they would rather die as a free person than live in oppression. It's just like, god damn, that's just like, I don't know, that movie just, even the fights themselves too, yeah, they're also like glorious CGI fights, but again, the emotional impact of what the fights are for. Not just like, oh, this is for Wakanda. It's like, no, this is for an ideal. It's either Killmonger is right, and we should all just be every person for themselves, and let's fight violence with violence. You know what I mean? Or it's the King's idea, Black Panther's idea. Like, no, we got to help the world. We got to unite with there's one community. If one person has more than another, that one person who has more has to share more of that responsibility, has to carry that weight a little bit more. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
yeah, just the movie to me resonates in a very thematical, emotional way for me personally. And then, like you mentioned before, the females in it are all super capable and super smart. Like Shuri and everybody else is his guard, and like the mom too, the queen. It's like they're all smart,
Mm.
they're all poignant, intelligent, beautiful women, and they all kick ass too, which is like really fun to see too. So, yeah, I really love that film a lot. And you're
Okay.
wrong for ranking it solo.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I'm gonna have to revisit this movie again. Um, yeah, nothing else to say.
All right. What's your number 4? Let's move on.
Number 4, I'm gonna change that to Black Panther real quick. No. Number 4 is Civil War.
Mm.
Um,
This is the funny part. I want to mention this because I don't know if you remember, but when we first talked about our rankings like a couple of years ago, you had Winter Soldier higher,
then Civil
right?
War, yeah,
Civil War, and I initially had Civil War higher than Winter Soldier, and now it's reversed,
it's reversed.
which is weird. Which is just to show audience, because now we're addressing you now because it's just been me and him talking. These lists can change all the time, and that's fine because your tastes change.
It's
Eventually,
fluid. Yeah.
it's not definitive. That was all a joke in the beginning. If you don't understand sarcasm, I'm sorry. It was sarcasm. Anyways, I'm sorry. Continue. You're number 4, Civil War.
Civil War. I feel like it is antithetical to my idea of what Endgame was.
Mm-hmm.
In that the emotional impact that this has does come from all the past like investment that you have with it, but I feel like it pays off a lot more than Endgame does because of the fact that you have these two characters, right, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, and they're on the opposite sides of an ideal, and that things are kind of, I mean, civil for the most part. Like they can discuss things up until the point where like Tony Stark realizes, hey, like your best friend killed my parents, right? And you're gonna choose his side. Like that's murder. I don't. Doesn't matter if like he's brainwashed or not. Like murder is murder, and it's not just murder. It's murder of my parents. And I thought you were my friend, and now you're taking his side. That emotional core of the film to me is like it really cuts into an understanding of what characters are and who and why they do what they do. And it puts Steve Rogers in this really weird like ethical dilemma, right? Up until that point, like you said, for the first Avenger, you understand who he is and he is what he is, whether you like it or not. Like he sticks to his guns, and this is the first time where he's kind of confronted with the idea of like, okay, am I like this person, or am I going to be that person? Like, do I stick to America for what it is and like do these whole like accords and follow the military and like, or do I be myself and like be that whole loyal friend and like ride or die for Bucky? Like he is kind of the reason why I am who I am. And so he's put through the emotional, he's put through the moral ringer in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you as the audience get to watch this happen, and you understand all the different parts that come into it. And then you yourself are kind of like, oh, like where do I side?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's almost no question that like most people side with Captain America. And I think that has a lot to do with like the state we live in and the government and like how, at least for those who are liberal, right, kind of don't agree with a lot of what the government does. And I think if this movie came, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, you might have more of a split. But at least you can understand where Tony Stark comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And then to put everything together the way that they did, yeah, it is Avengers 2.5, but I don't know, it's really smart, really clever. It's very poignant in terms of like the emotional buildup and then the way it pays off towards the end. So for me, it's up there. It's Winter Soldier is fun, and you get this whole like bromance, but to me, Civil War kind of puts everything more into perspective. It makes you kind of question yourself too, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so bad dropping it Solo compared to
Mhm.
you. Well, not Solo. It's at 9. It's not that far off from 4, but yeah, and it's also too like, yeah, like you said, Cap questions it, but I feel like also at the end he realizes who he is and he decides to be who he is, right? Whereas like he'll defend what he believes in to the bitter end, even
Mhm.
even if it's at the cost of everything else he's worked on. In this case, the cost of him being an Avenger and him being considered Captain America because he gives up the shield, right?
Right.
Tony tells him, "You're not worthy of carrying that shield. My father made that shield," and he drops the shield. Like, okay, right? So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. It's a poignant. That was originally my argument, which is weird,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just I don't know. Maybe tomorrow I might be like, I made a mistake. Civil War #3, but we'll
Right.
see. But yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I love that film too. God, this is why this list is so hard because now I'm
Yeah.
going through it and I'm like, I want to change it now, but it's too late.
Shit.
It's
I
This
know.
is the list we made.
I would have changed Black Panther too, but it is what it is.
Maybe we'll do like Infinity Saga revisited episode
Maybe.
in the future. In the future, though, in the future.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
but
tomorrow.
yeah. in, in any case, my number 4 is Captain America: Winter Soldier. Just mostly because it's just a really good film. Like I'm
Mhm.
hard pressed to find anything wrong with it. It's a great Captain America film because it gives you more of who Captain America is, but in like in a modern day context. It's a very good spy drama. Surprisingly, like it doesn't rely heavily on
Yeah.
like superhero antics. It almost feels kind of James Bondy / Mission Impossible esque, but it's Captain America. It's an MCU film, which I really love. Um, the bad guys in it are bad guys you never suspect because technically the bad guys are Shield, but it's Shield being infiltrated by Hydra, which is a great twist too. If you're not a comic book fan, like you don't really see that coming when you realize like, oh, Shield is Hydra, like Hydra infiltrated Shield, like holy crap,
Mhm.
that's a great twist. We get a more understanding and a better understanding of Black Widow, who up to this point in Iron Man 2, she was just kind of like this good-looking kick-ass chick, but you kind of understand more of who she actually is as an individual and yeah, and she kicks a lot more ass in Winter Soldier. I feel like too. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, and then you get Bucky, the return of Bucky, and the poignancy of that relationship, and how like the emotional stakes of that third act fight between Bucky and Captain America, and how Captain America is like, I'm not gonna fight you, Buck. Like you're programmed to kill me, and if you need to do it to live, then do it. But you're my friend, and I love you, and I'm not gonna do that. Right? It's the reason why in Civil War he feels that need to protect Bucky. and how basically Captain America giving up is what helps Bucky come back to himself, which is so poignant, right?
Mm,
Because he gives up the fight so that Bucky can come back to himself. Because he keeps going like, why aren't you fighting, why? And he goes, I'm with you to the bitter end. And that kind of like triggers that memory in
yeah.
Bucky, like, who the heck am I really? And it's just it's just so good. That movie's so good, and I don't find anything wrong with it, really. I'm trying to think. It's just it's good, man. It's
Yeah.
just a really good film, and it's one of those films too where this is probably another reason why I have it so high up. It's a good standalone film. Like, you don't have to watch the movies before it to
Mm,
understand this movie. It's just a good on its own movie. Which in the MCU, I guess it's not necessarily a necessity or a requirement to be considered a great film per se, but it helps it, because usually in the context of the whole MCU saga, Infinity Saga, everything kind of informs everything else. There's a couple of films that are just like, nope, this is just that film that happened during this time. As really, it doesn't say that the implications of this film won't affect future films, but you don't need anything else to understand what this film is, if that makes sense.
hmm
So yeah, Winter Soldier, I love it a lot. It's really good.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's like, yeah, in terms of like next to Iron Man, right? Almost perfect.
Yeah, and I want to apologize because I've been burping a lot. But yeah,
Okay,
what's
my
your
number
number
3
three?
is Ant-Man.
Oh my god.
I love Ant-Man. So number 1, right? It's just incredibly fun film. I love heist movies. It's a little formulaic, sure, but it's like it's fun. You know exactly what you're getting, and it's you get to see all the different gadgets, like, and the planning. Like, I love to plan, like, and so to see a heist movie and how like they build a plan, that to me is like, oh yeah, okay, that's my jam. um, and then the emotional core of that film is fantastic, right? It's like you said, it's this guy who is, a criminal for all intents and purposes. He's technically a scum of society, but all he wants to do is get back to a normal life and get back to his daughter, and he wants to be a better person because of her. And I think this movie never loses sight of that. And that's what a great story is, right? It's when you can get a good understanding of an emotional core of a character. You can put him in any situation, and that character will still be like that character. Yeah, it's why you can see like Batman in in almost any kind of situation, and you still understand who Batman is because of the emotional core. And same thing with Ant-Man. You can put Scott Lang in almost any situation, as long as you don't forget what the emotional core is of him being a father and him being trying to be a better person and redeem himself, like you said. You can, I don't know, this movie to me is really great.
My number 3 is Iron Man. Boom. Same reasons you said. I just rank it higher because, again, and this is a movie I watched relatively recently. I think I watched it a few months ago. Besides being the fact that it's royalty, because it literally started it all, it's just it's a really damn close to perfect film. It's this perfect standalone film. You understand who Tony Stark is. You understand his journey. You understand why he does the things he does. Nothing really feels like filler in the film. It all kind of informs everything leading up to the big spectacular kind of third ending act. And it even the formula for the way this movie works is also kind of like it's the MCU formula, you could say. So you
Mhm.
could really see how everything else is kind of like an echo of what Iron Man was in that sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just great, man. It's a redemption story for Tony Stark, and in real life, it's a redemption story for Robert Downey Jr., who like at this time just was somewhat blacklisted in Hollywood. Like people didn't believe in him, didn't trust him because of all the problems he had in his past. But it just goes to show that literally people can change and become the hero they always knew they could be, both in fiction and in real life. And Jon Favreau's directing is superb in it. The dialogue, even Jon Favreau's happy, is great in it.
Yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow is really good in it. Jeff Bridges is like one of my favorite actors is in it, and he's so good in it too. And it's just a fun film. It's fun. It's poignant. It's damn near perfect. In terms of like favorite superhero films, like my ultimate is always like Dark Knight, and then I always fight now between like Logan and Iron Man in terms of like perfect standalone superhero films.
Logan
So,
is really good too.
yeah, that's another discussion for another time. But so if you've been paying attention, listener, you should have a good idea of what my number one and my number two are, because I haven't mentioned them at all up to this point. But
yeah, I was wondering where you were going to put Iron Man. Number 3. Okay.
Which is like, because I put Iron Man 2 and 3 so low, and I think that's why I probably put him so low, because Iron Man 1 for me just I hold it in such high regard that 2 and 3 just feel uber disappointing compared to that first film, to me personally. So that's probably why I have him literally at the bottom of my list, unfortunately. But anyways, all right.
I can see that if you're going to put them like in a trilogy sense, right? Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, they don't even compare. Not even close.
They don't come close at all.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah. Okay, number 2 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Wow, that's really high.
It is so high, but
it's so high.
I don't know.
Were you that high when you were making this? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's for everything you said, but it's like I disagree that it's a Star-Lord movie. Like I think that's true. That's the main plot, and it kind of drives the story forward. But the whole thing is, it's family, but it's not just like them as a family. It's different iterations of what family is, different kinds of love, right? Because you're dealing with the whole like paternal love. Like okay, like I'm torn between the biological father I never knew, and then the whole like surrogate father that I've always had, never realized. And then it deals with sisterly love between Gamora and oh gosh, what's her name?
Nebula.
Thank you. Right, and like that whole like side story is really great too. Like that one, really, it hits home because it deals a lot with sibling rivalry, and the fact that like you get an understanding of like what it means to be an older sister or an older sibling and a younger sibling, and like how like those perceptions are kind of warped. And then you deal with the whole Yondu and Rocket Raccoon, right? How like it's more of a friendship, I guess it builds, right? But it really brings Rocket's character like full circle, right? Because he's not full circle, but you get a huge understanding of like why he's an asshole, and then he realizes that like being an asshole, it's not always a good thing, right? He needs to learn to accept other people into his life, and he only gets that when he's interacting with Yondu, who like has a whole crew of like people. So he like perfect person to kind of teach that lesson of like accepting people to be a part of your life. And then Groot being like, I guess, kind of like the baby or like the pet of the family, how everyone kind of like takes care of him. And then the whole thing you say between Drax and Mantis, like that, I don't know, like Drax's character is, yes, it's like over the top, he's kind of crazy, but for good reason. And you understand exactly why in this. And I don't know, to me, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is like a really good character study. You know, if you want to learn how to write characters and give them like depth beyond of what you see on screen, like all the subtext that goes into who they are, this is what you should be watching and studying. So you get everyone coming together, but still being an individual. It doesn't feel like a group per se. Mm-hmm. It just feels like, a bunch of people living together.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with its ranking, but I agree with it.
This is one I watch all the time, like over and over again.
That's fair. It's one of
Hmm.
your favorite films. High up there. My number 2 is Avengers: Infinity War. Uh, you said something earlier that if you were to judge these films as solo films, then yeah, they're not good films on their own merit. But at the same time, I don't think you can judge the last two Avengers films purely based on old criteria because nothing like this has ever been done before. Whereas like this cinematic universe being built leading up to a grand finale, it's just never been done before. So I don't feel like you can judge these films, Avengers: Infinity War and Avengers: Endgame. I don't feel like you can judge them based on like our perceived notions or old criteria for what films are because films aren't that anymore for me personally. That being said, Infinity War, I love it because yes, it is called Avengers Infinity War, but it should be called Thanos. It should be called Avengers
Hmm.
Thanos because it is the world being introduced to Thanos officially, right? Like we got little snippets of him here and there. We always knew he was there in the background, but now we finally are confronted with him and we see who he is, the threat that he is, but why he does the things he does and why it drives him and why it makes him ultimately in this film, why it makes him successful in achieving his goals. And I love Josh Brolin. He does a fantastic. He gives Thanos so much depth and life. And yeah, you don't agree with him, but I guess you could say you sympathize a little bit with him or you empathize, I guess. Like I get where you're coming from, but your methods are what you disagree with.
Hmm.
But you understand why. You understand the why of it. So he doesn't feel like a pure bad guy. He feels a little crazy for sure. But he's not like that twirly mustache villain, you know what I mean? Like he has depth and character and you understand his mythos essentially. And just the movie for an Avengers movie, it opens up so dour with the destruction of the Asgard ship and him killing Loki, like choking him and breaking his neck. And it's just like, oh, we're in it now. We're in it. You know what I mean? And it's the same reason why I think a lot of people love Empire Strikes Back, because the movie ends with the bad guys winning, right? And Empire Strikes Back, like Luke gets his arm cut off, Han Solo's in kryptonite, and the Empire has the rebellion running. In Avengers Infinity War, Loki dies. Uh, oh God, I'm blanking out. I feel so dumb. Mind Stone, Vision dies, right?
Ultron 2.0.
Yeah, Ultron 2.0, Vision dies, and ultimately Thanos wins. He gets all the stones and he wipes out half of existence. Like the bad guy won, and now the good guys are running off with their tail between their legs, and it's so poignant. And it's just like holy crap! And the fact that the movie ends kind of like on the hero's note with Thanos resting, like he did it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's just the acting in it too. Like it does jumble a lot, right? Because it has the Avengers in it. You have like a little storyline with Thor, a little storyline with the Avengers and Gamora, a little storyline with Spider-Man and Tony Stark and all those things. But I feel like it balances those things so well, and the emotional impact of everything in it. Like that movie still hits for me. Like the scene with Peter, like Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. Makes me cry
Mm.
literally every time. The scene with Star-Lord realizing that Gamora's gone, like you understand why in that moment Star-Lord becomes so emotional because the woman he loves has been killed, like literally murdered for the gain of this mad titan. Um, oh God, I can gush about this movie all day, honestly, but yeah, I can't judge Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame based on like do they work alone as a film because they weren't made with that purpose behind it. They were made as a conclusion to this 10-year, 23 film epic saga conclusion that's just never been done before. It's the same way that I feel like you can't really judge any Star Wars film on its own except for maybe New Hope because Star Wars New Hope was built as like a standalone film. But even then, all the other films that come after it and before it, right, technically speaking, before it, all inform that film. So you can't really judge one Star Wars film as that's like its own film because then you don't get the whole picture. The same way you can't. I feel like you can't really judge, at least in this case, in Avengers Infinity Avengers Infinity War or Avengers Endgame as like its own standalone film, because it's not meant to be a standalone film. It's meant to not inform but conclude everything that kind of came before it, if that makes sense. So yeah, obviously I'm pretty sure everyone knows what my number one would probably be then. But before I say it, what's your number one?
Thor Ragnarok.
Oh,
It was
okay.
number one. Because it's funny. It's just so fun. But it reinvents who Thor is, and in a way that's like not unrecognizable. Like you still get an essence of who Thor was, but now it's just like it's opened it up even more. You get more of a glimpse of like more depth into his character, and then it's like you said, it builds more into like other worlds and the universe and how that functions outside of Earth, which is weird because like normally like I don't care for space movies per se. Like I've never seen the original Star Wars trilogy.
Wow.
I mean I've seen bits and pieces. I know the story. I get it,
we
but
just lost every audience member we might have had or did have.
But I have never fully seen those first three movies. I've seen the prequels, and I've seen the more recent ones, but because space just doesn't really intrigue me. Like Star Trek never intrigued me. My least favorite Power Rangers were the ones in space. But Thor Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy, like, yes, they're in space, but they're not about space. It's more about the characters. Like you said, like talking Hulk as a character on its own, it really drives into the fact that he's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it's just it's great. Everything that you said that I was gonna like add on to, I've completely forgotten because it was so long ago.
It feels like years ago.
Yeah, but I love this film too. Though it kind of talks a lot about the political system in a way, right? Not per se, not political, but like imperialism, right? Because it talks about how Hela and Odin kind of they essentially invaded and colonized other realms and then called it their own. And it talks about how Hela wants to continue that, right? And how Odin's like he kind of realized, oh, like that was a mistake. We need to change history. And that's another thing, right? It talks about how history is subjective, right? They always say it's the winners get to write history, that you don't get to hear history from the loser side. And this film talks about it right in the beginning, right? You get the chorus singing the theme from the other Thor movies during that play that Loki's watching, and it kind of shows you how like Loki himself is changing history right in front of your eyes. Right? He kind of rewrote the story. He changed himself to be the hero, and how like everyone should be like revering him because he gets to change history, and that's a very subtle way of kind of like introducing that whole concept of imperialism. And then you get this whole like the Korg talking about how he wanted to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets. Nobody showed up. Which is really funny. But in a sense, it's like it talks about a revolution and how you can't have a revolution without people behind you. And then that kind of pays off towards the end where like Thor gets to fight off Hela because the people kind of stand behind him. And he kind of leads that revolution against Hela's reign over what Asgard was at the time. Yeah, and it's really it's clever, and you can dissect it in so many ways. The more and more I watch it, like also the colors in this are really vibrant, like compared to the other Thor movies. Like it changes everything.
I agree with that too. Yeah. Thor Ragnarok's a good film. My number one is Avengers Endgame. Kind of like how I mentioned before, you can't judge this, to me at least, you can't judge this movie as like a standalone film. It's not meant to be a standalone film. It's meant to be the conclusion of all these 23 films that have come before it, right? In some sense or another, it's meant to be the epic conclusion to this world building that's led up to this point. Literally, not to say that every movie served the ending, because a lot of films that we mentioned are kind of standalone films that have a little bit of an ending, a little end credit that kind of informs what's to come. But it's supposed to be like the epic conclusion to this really long Infinity Saga. And for me, it's unprecedented. It's never been done before. And the fact that they were able to pull it off and do it so well, to me personally, where again they juggle all these pieces, but every character that they juggle with has their moment to shine. Every actor gets to act, from Black Widow's poignant sacrifice to Captain America coming to terms of like he failed his ultimate goal of being like America's protector. Tony Stark coming back and realizing that he failed by holding a grudge. It's just people coming to terms with their failure. Heroes, people that were meant to protect us that ultimately failed because of their failures, realizing that the failures don't define who they are. It's what they do after they fail that defines who they are. That's what makes them heroes. That even up until that point where all they've done is fail, and literally they say like 5 years later, and like the world's in this complete different position. Like even up to that point, they still don't quite give up, and they find a way to kind of make sense of everything, right? And the fact too that all of a sudden the movie becomes, it subverts expectations because they kill off Thanos right at the beginning, and then eventually they figure out they can go back in time, and then the movie becomes a very clever, in my opinion, a very
Uh-oh.
like 4 or 5 times. It's a 3 hour movie, and I never feel the time when I watch it. I just never feel it, and all the emotional beats still make me emotional, man. Especially that ending scene where it's like when Cap gets Mjolnir, he's able to hold it,
Oh,
and you're just like, I knew it. You're like, holy shit! It's still fucking. I still get goosebumps. The
yeah.
when Ant-Man comes back and he hugs Cassie, he's like, you're so big.
Oh,
Still makes me tear up. Um, the scene where he becomes old and he becomes a baby, Tony Stark with his kid, and like he was able to reconcile with Pepper, and how he comes back, and just the emotional drama. It's played for like a joke, but you get it, the emotional trauma that Thor is going
mm-hmm,
through, and like realizing like he still has a little bit of that ego in him that caused him to not end it when he should have with Thanos, because
mm-hmm,
Thanos says he should have aimed for the head, and Thor realizes it because he wanted Thanos to suffer. But he didn't just end it just to end it. You know what I mean? His ego got in the way of that, and Thor kind of struggling with that aspect of everything, with Nebula kind of coming to grips that like she finally found a family and she lost it. And just everything, dude, just everything about that film is just so poignant. It's so well made. It's the most epic conclusion to anything ever made ever up to this point. I stand by that. Up to this point, right? Who knows where Marvel goes on from here, or even DC, or even if the DC universe is able to catch up, right? But up to this point, it's the most epic, ambitious thing that's ever been done in cinema prior to it, and they fucking pulled it off so beautifully, so poignantly, to where it is spectacle, but the spectacle isn't just spectacle for spectacle's sake. Like the
that's,
reason it resonates with the audience, I know a lot of spectacle in it, but
yeah.
the reason it resonates so poignantly with the audience is because you literally, everyone gives a shit about the characters on screen. To where when you finally, here's the thing I love about it too, right? We know as an audience they succeeded in bringing everybody back, because Hawkeye gets that phone call from his wife, but the movie is so good at tricking you and forgetting that, because immediately after that, Thanos comes back to get into that epic fight, and you're just like, oh man. And for a split moment, whether you want to admit it or not, audience, for a split moment, you think Thanos is literally going to win again, and then you hear Falcon on your left, and all the portals open up, and you see Wakanda Nation come out. You see Falcon fly through. You see Spider-Man Peter Parker come back. You see the Guardians of the Galaxy. You see everyone literally come back, and you're like, holy shit, that's right, they did it. But the movie is so good. in like directing your emotions to where you literally forget immediately afterwards that they succeeded. It's not until up until that point. And then finally, after 10 freaking years, you finally hear Captain America say Avengers Assemble. And
Mhm.
so it's so epic, that fight scene. It is spectacle. It's the most spectacle thing ever. But it also, the reason it works so well too is because you care. The emotional impact of it is like, oh my god, finally, like you have all this tension leading up to it, and they finally release it. It's just like a woo moment. Yeah, and it's just the movie's 3 hours long, and I don't feel it. I've watched it like 4 or 5 times, and I've never felt that runtime. Every time I watch it, I'm like, oh my god, and I'm in tears because I haven't even talked about like Iron Man and the perfect come full circle to where he ends the first movie with Iron Man, and then he ends this movie, and how even though he's saying the same sentence, they both mean completely different things. Because in the first Iron Man film, it's still kind of to feed his ego a little bit, to be like, I
Mhm.
want the world to recognize that I am Iron Man. But in the second film, he's not saying it to the world, he's saying it directly to Thanos, and he's telling Thanos like, I am the one willing to make that sacrifice. You know what I mean? Like, I am
Mhm.
Iron Man. I am the one that
Yeah.
started it, and I will be the one that ends it. And it's just ah, I love that film,
Yeah.
man. It has to be number one for me.
You are not wrong. You are not wrong for putting it at number one. Yeah, but even the idea of like it means something different, but it's also means the same thing, right? The whole I am Iron
Yeah,
Man. It's him accepting that role of like I'm gonna put all this on my shoulders. Like
yeah,
me,
that's true
me
too.
alone. Like with these words, I am accepting that responsibility.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Like, it's different but the same. That's true too. It's just it's so good.
Yeah.
It makes you want to go.
And it also really mirrors Thanos saying I am inevitable
Hmm.
to him saying I am Iron Man. It's yeah, that one line is just it's perfect.
Because like it's the ultimate proof that like good always triumphs ultimately in the
Mhm.
end, right? Because Thanos up to that point is also driven by ego, and that's why he says I am inevitable. But
Mhm.
the reason why Tony Stark wins at the end is because he's no longer driven by ego. He's driven by the good of all, at this point, all life in all the universe. He's driven by selflessness, and he says I am Iron Man. It's just
Yeah.
I want to go
Ah.
watch it now.
Yeah, just yeah. If you look at, I mean, Infinity Saga basically is the story of Iron Man and to a lesser degree Captain America, right?
Mm,
It's their journeys, and their paths are kind of crossing this way, where Tony
mm.
Stark starts off as being really selfish, and he ends up being like selfish, like the ultimate sacrifice. And then Captain America is opposite. He starts off as being really
Selfless.
selfless, right? He's all for the country, all for the and then towards the end, it's like okay, he's like he makes choices where he needs to be a little more selfish, do things for himself, and like at the end, he gets the life that Tony always told him to get. Right? He goes back in time and he kind of lives everything that he missed out on.
Yeah, it's so good too. It's just
Yeah.
so poetic the way they've always been like these opposites,
Hmm.
but they've also always kind of been like on this weird same trajectory of like being the hero that the world needed at the time too. So
Hmm.
ah yeah, we did it. And
Yay.
there's definitely a couple of things I see here that I might change,
On your
but
list?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I'm definitely gonna have to change this at some point.
But for right now, it is what it is. So
Yeah.
you tell us, querido listener, querido means dear listener. Um, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think we're dumb? Uh, if you have those comments, keep them to yourself. Just like and subscribe. We don't want to hear them. Um, nah, well, you can
Mm.
say them. No guarantee we'll see them. But if you have comments, you're obviously free to say it. Just don't we're free to listen to them or not. But for sure, subscribe. If you agree with us, give us that thumbs up. Or if you disagree, give us a thumbs down. But for sure, subscribe regardless. You can either hate watch us or love watch us, whichever one you prefer. It's completely up to you. As long as you subscribe, we don't care. Um, This is what I forgot to do in our last plugs.
Oh, plugs. Uh-oh.
Okay, it seems. Oh, there
You
you are.
are cutting. There you go. All right. Uh-oh. My internet looks fine. Okay. You want to do this?
Yeah. You want to try? You want me to try that again? You can just
Yeah.
edit that out later. Okay. So this is what I forgot to do on the last video we did. But Brian, you got any socials, or where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kuno_stars. That's KUNO_STARS.
Brilliant. And you can find me on all socials, Instagram and Twitter at DavidBMusic21, and on YouTube and Twitch as David B Music. And eventually, once COVID is over, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, you can find me probably at a bar eventually. Which one? Who knows? But I'll be at a bar. So
Yeah.
and that man, that was epic. I can't yeah, we did it. That took a long time. I'm gonna be looking forward. I'm gonna be shocked by how long this is. I think because
Yeah.
it feels like half an hour, 45 minutes. It's probably way longer, isn't it?
No, it's probably like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Something.
And we're like we're gonna breeze through this, man. And nope.
Yeah.
But anyways, legit listener, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. I know I'm very joking, very mean to you sometimes. It's just the way I show love. So, Brian, any last words?
No, I just please don't hate me for hating on Black Panther.
No, it's because I'm not gonna go there. There's an obvious joke there, but I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned before, we don't really have an outro except for just cut. So I guess that'll be our outro for now. So
Peace.
cut.